Welcome to another episode of Let's Start Justice with JFJ's team. My name is Mikkel Jackson, Executive Director of JFJ.
And I'm Jade Williams, Policy and Advocacy Specialist at JFJ.
So yesterday we celebrated democracy in action. Yes. And my purple has since been removed because I scoured as best as I possibly could yesterday evening. But certainly, we're proud to be voters who exercise that right. But I want to issue caution to those who are shaming others. I only shame my close friends and family. But to the public, I recognize that there are other issues that may not have resulted in you exercising your right to vote. So just want to exercise that caution that you are still deserving of representation. Certainly, you pay your property tax, your income tax, and all of those taxes. So no one should be saying that they're denying you that representation and so on. Neither at the local government nor at the central government, certainly.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Certainly.
You know, I should walk around in JFJ office and look at people's finger.
Well.
No, I shouldn't. You can report me to ECJ.
Yes, I would certainly endeavor to report you.
I don't think I'll be violating any procedural rules if I walk around and said office closed yesterday with a purple ink.
You know, I saw a question on I'd like to keep my franchise private, thank you. You know, I saw a question on Twitter asking if you received your 3 hours to go and vote.
Plus your 1 hour lunch break.
And you didn't vote. Does your company still have to pay you?
The law is completely silent. So yes, they should pay you. Right? So I would say go vote, but certainly if you went to the spa, the coffee shop or so on, let me rephrase that. Let me go back in my ED capacity. I hope my staff went and voted yesterday.
Yes.
As good human rights champion.
Right, correct.
But for the other members of the public, you are still deserving of your salaries.
Absolutely.
Yes?
Yes.
All right. So let's get straight into it. The last week that was not a human rights issue, but Hubert Lawrence. February has not been good for Jamaica. We've lost so many stalwarts. Hubert Lawrence, sports broadcaster, he actually explained to me when I was working at a media house, Jade, how to understand football. Can you imagine asking Mikkel Jackson to write on a football match? It was FIFA World Cup at the time. I had no clue. So he took the time to explain that to me. So Hubert Lawrence and family, his family condolences, but certainly a stalwart in his field. So that is something to note. Another month has passed and we still have no word from the Ministry of Gender around the status of the Joint Select Committee that was promised to us. I think we need to follow up officially if some meeting has been held, but certainly we find it very problematic that despite the comprehensive review that was promised, despite a Joint Select Committee being promised, having waited so long, we have not yet heard anything. So that is something we will keep on top of, and we're just bringing it to the public that still nothing. Today, the legal manager and I should have been in St. James Parish Court hearing the Mario Dean matter. Now, if you remember, Mario Dean killed while in state custody. The matter is now before the courts, having faced delay of almost a decade. Mario Dean, if you remember, he was charged and in lockup for a simple marijuana
possession
of a marijuana at the time.
Something that's no longer
that's been decriminalized. No, systemic delays and administrative issues have plagued this particular case. You realize I'm not in St. James.
Yes.
So another delay has faced this particular matter. And I won't speak much to it because the legal manager, Ms. Richards, is expected to be reaching out to the family and we will strategize a way forward. But certainly, I think it's important that we preemptively and preliminarily bring something to the public that this can't continue. It can't continue because at some point when it comes to matters of state accountability, the state reneging on its responsibility in protecting the rights of the vulnerable, and when the state is actually accused of violating some of our more fundamental rights, we believe that waiting 10 years, and in this case more, based on the delay, then it reeks of lack of accountability and you will see these things persistently happening. But it is also not fair for those who are involved, those who are accused of a crime either. But to the family, JFJ remains supportive of your case and of you as an individual. And I hope that the public will join us at the appropriate time when we speak on this matter to say that no more delays.
Not to give any details on this particular matter, but administrative issues in the judicial system is something that we have been highlighting to be addressed. Issues with delay, transcripts that are preventing persons' appeals from being heard. We have highlighted these issues so extensively, and it is frustrating to see other matters that do not involve state actors seem to move with much quicker steps than those.
The state is all powerful, so you must be greater.
State actors. So it is disheartening that at this point there is another delay for Mario's family.
Yeah, thanks much, Jade. I think the last human rights issue that I would want us to quickly acknowledge, for those who are following the news cycle, you would have seen where 2 men in St. Vincent and filed a constitutional claim against the government to declare the Buggery law unconstitutional on the basis that it is violating privacy and so on. So the judgment was actually issued last week. That's February 22nd, last week. And what is interesting is that the court ruled that because the 2 men were living overseas and have not been in St. Vincent for years, they have no locus standi to bring the matter. So in other words, they are not they're not directly impacted by it. They have no legal standing in the court to bring that particular case. And it was on that basis that seemingly the case was dismissed. And interestingly, there are 2 areas of reference here for JFJ, because in our constitutional submission, we made a recommendation that this locus standi issue may not be necessarily applicable here, direct reference, but we made a recommendation around that being adjusted a little bit, as well as, we're not in support of the retention of the Buggery law. So we're watching these cases across the Caribbean and how they are being ruled on.
Yes, it's unfortunate that it was a technicality, though, that prevented, because you wouldn't have heard the substantive matter. They would have only heard understanding, and that's quite unfortunate. But yes, so thank you so much, Mikel, for your human rights / all other important things recap for the week. And we'll go straight into our human right of the day / did you know of the day, which is taken from our constitution as well at section 16.6, which speaks to our right to due process. And it says that every person who is accused of a crime is presumed innocent until proven guilty or they have admitted guilt. They have the right to be informed promptly in a language they understand about the charges against them. They should have enough time and resources to prepare their defense. They are able to defend themselves and choose legal representation, and if they cannot afford it, they should be provided with assistance to ensure their fair trial. They also have the right to question witnesses and present their own. Access to an interpreter is also allowed under the Constitution, and they cannot be forced to testify against themselves. Additionally, they cannot be tried without being present unless they would have given that permission, or they have disrupted the court, or they have fled during their trial. And if you are listening to those stipulations there, a lot of these things would not be accessible to a person who is in a mental state in which they cannot make certain decisions or understand certain actions. So that will be something that we talk about in our substantive topic. Before we do that, though, our trivia question for today, very simple today. I should actually dot the amount that we normally give for the prize. But in what year was our Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms last amended? So you can respond to that via WhatsApp at 2397583 or via Instagram at JA4Justice.
All right. So Another issue came up in the news cycle last week, and it is a discussion that we're going to be having. And Jade has so nicely named such a concerning topic, Lost in Limbo, addressing mentally ill inmates in Jamaica. And we have with us joining the conversation and our lead interviewee, if you will, Dr. Mayo U. That's correct?
Yo U.
Yo U. Okay.
Yo
U.
Okay. Yo U. All right. He's a sessional consultant psychiatrist within the Department of Correctional Services. But before we get into the interview, just to indicate that last week there was a Jamaica Observer article that highlighted some of the concerns with prison overcrowding and the management of mentally ill individuals in conflict with the law. And the article centered around the issue of transfer of around 50 mentally ill prisoners from St. Catherine Adult Correctional Centre to the Tower Street Adult Correctional Centre in Kingston, which has significantly increased the number of inmates diagnosed with mental disorders to over 200, leading to concerns about staff pressures, among other areas.
And while efforts were made to refurbish the facilities at St. Catherine Prison, concerns persist about the therapeutic environment and the potential for abuse for mental disordered inmates. Moreover, plans for further transfers between facilities indicate ongoing challenges in managing prison populations and addressing infrastructure needs.
Now, we have been very clear here at JFJ that we are continuing partnership and our own advocacy on this issue. So our partnership with Stand Up for Jamaica and the Public Law Chambers with Terence Williams, Celine Diedrich, and John Clark have seen us calling for improved treatment of mentally ill individuals in conflict with the law. We also have attorney Nastasia Robinson on the matter, and we are looking at how we can improve the legislative and the policy framework dealing with issues of due process rehabilitation as we talk about tackling prison overcrowding. And the recommendations also include more psychiatric facilities for the individuals, and of course having some laws repealed to see these types of injustices being dealt with. So we're going to be talking about the issue of monitoring these prison overcrowding, especially when it comes to mentally ill individuals. But Jade, before we get into it, I will just ask you to set the framework of what the issue is before we ask Doc to share his perspective before we get to the break.
Well, certainly from JFJ's standpoint, one of the challenges that we've seen, and it didn't start with this, but this case highlighted it quite intensely, was that of Noel Chambers, where we found that persons who have been deemed unfit to plea are being held at that time at the Governor General's pleasure, should have been transferred to the court's pleasure from the inquiry into that matter with Noel Chambers. But essentially, those persons that are being held at the court's pleasure in these correctional facilities are supposed to be monitored in a certain way that would ensure that they are constantly evaluated, that they are given therapeutic treatment so that they could be brought to such a place where they may be fit to plea and go through their fair trial, or it will be determined that that rehabilitation is not possible and other alternative orders will be made for them to be dealt with, but those orders would not involve their continued stay in the correctional facility. Now the challenge is the persons who are in correctional facilities, a vast majority of them are not trained to deal with persons with mental illness, and therefore the treatment that the persons with mental illness end up receiving can be rife with human rights violations. So with the work of the Public Law Chambers in collaboration with JFJ and Stand Up, we would have seen persons being released from these facilities as it would have been determined that the rehabilitation needed for them to go through trial was not possible. Mm-hmm. There are several other points on this, but we'll take the break, and when we come back, we'll discuss some of them with Dr. Oos. So.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. Dr. Yohu. Can I just say Doc? Because
you just say, yeah, that's okay.
Thank you so much.
Right.
And my sincerest apologies. I'm trying, but I hope I'm not offending at all.
No, that's okay.
Thank
it
you
happens
so
all the time.
Yes. All right. I feel terrible. But could you just paint the picture for us because we've been following the case for those who read the media report. So this was quite shocking and disappointing, this particular development. What is the overall concern for those? And before you answer, just to lastly point out, just to bring it home to people, you have individuals in prison who may or may not be mentally ill, depending on well, let me not say mentally ill, depending on medication and so on. They can, receive treatment and lead normal lives. But in any event, they've not had a day in court at all for some of them, some as high as 40 odd years, which means they would have served prison sentences longer than those who perhaps went through the court system and were found guilty. So just to put that in context for our listeners. So over 40 years, sometimes 50 without ever having a trial at all. What is your overarching concern, Doc?
Well, this is a big topic, so I would say. First of all, I'd like to say that it is very unfortunate that mentally ill offenders are inside the prison. They should not be inside the prison at all. They should be in the hospital setting. They should be specifically in the forensic psychiatric hospital, which Jamaica, we never had it at all. I learned that up to 1975, there is a ward at Bellevue Hospital, and that was operational until 1975, until a big fire destroyed the building. And then that ward was shut down, and there is no attempt to reopen that forensic psychiatric ward. And then that time, a number of persons who were under Governor General pleasure were sent to Tower Street Prison. And since then, we have mentally ill offenders are coming to the prison system, so which is very unfortunate. If you look at the number of the people coming in now, we still keep coming up to these days because until that time, there are a number of policy change, even the Ministry of Health, and we had a Mental Health Act 1997, and then now the Bellevue Hospital in the past was the only psychiatric institution for the island-wide for both inpatient and outpatient. That's for acute, subacute services and chronic long-stay services. Now the policy has changed now that Bellevue Hospital now is going to be divided into two institutions. One is that one smaller modern neuropsychiatric hospital, which is only 100 bed. And the other section of the Bellevue is going to be transformed into adult care facilities. The reason why the government have decided with the policy to develop this adult care facility is that these people are abandoned because they are there for a long time.
I think they said, over 600 social
cases?
cases?
No, it's not over 600 so far. Right now, I think close to 500
Okay.
people are there. They are abandoned by the family. They have been there for a long time. Some have a limited number of family support, but some family at this point cannot be able to accommodate back there at home. And a smaller number have relatives abroad, living abroad. So they receive like once a year visit when they come to visit the island overseas, and they come and meet their loved one and so on. So that's how it is now. So therefore, there were attempts to make this the population to be discharged, and also that that our system we don't have enough nursing home, and also our infirmaries are not that capacity in terms of infrastructure as well as the trained personnel to deal effectively with these mentally ill people. So therefore, now the Ministry of Health has decided to have this policy, adult care facility. It's a form of a mental institution to provide therapeutic environment as well as for rehabilitation, and eventually we hope that these people will be transferred to the community so that they can live as free citizens at all. So with all these things now, when the Bellevue is downsizing, and then our policy of the Ministry of Health is that, because I just retired from the Ministry of Health last year, July, as the senior medical officer post from Bellevue Hospital. And our policy is that now we want to open psychiatric ward in the general hospital, island-wide. And we want to develop the community mental health services, and so that anyone, one other thing is that people who have mental illness have a stigma. Yeah. Yes. So if you have a mental illness in the past, like you have to go to Bellevue to get treatment. So when you go to Bellevue now, people try to label Bellevue as a madhouse or a big yard or whatever, So therefore now the stigma is there. So therefore they based on this policy change now, we want to do decentralization policy, meaning that if you have a mental illness, you don't need to go to Bellevue, but you need to attend nearest health center,
Yes.
Community mental health clinics to get treatment. And also at the same time, we want to do deinstitutionalization. Services are not centralized at Bellevue, but across the island wide, that area that you want to keep it that way. So strictly speaking, because you see, if we have all these programs, simultaneously happen, that means you have all the psychiatric ward available in the general hospital island-wide, as well as community mental health services, along with the crisis response team. There would be, if we have impeccable services in the community mental health system and the psychiatric bed readily available for any acutely psychotic people, there should be no or zero psychiatric patient who committed offenses and come into prison at all, So therefore, if you want to look at the scope, the whole scope of that now, why the numbers are coming to the prison system.
Yeah, because I have a question at the appropriate time in terms of the number of psychiatrists within the prison facilities,
right,
versus that decentralized recommendation that you're making, and whether or not that decentralized approach would still have the sufficient human resource to meet the needs.
See, I can give you a kind of a period like, say, 3 periods, like before 2005, that is before the Criminal Justice Administration Act amended.
Yes.
All right. That I'm sure you are aware that Criminal Justice Administration Act was amended in 2005, which replaces Governor General pleasure to court pleasures. Right. Before that, I think the prison system has only like 2 psychiatrists. One permanently employed psychiatrist, and one is a sectional psychiatrist. Right. Between 2005 and 2010, that is the Novel Chamber time, and the prison has the one consultant psychiatrist and about 3 sectional psychiatrists. So about 3 or 4 psychiatrists available. But then after 2010 now, there is a dramatic increase in the budget, as well as because the case Novel Chamber push in a way the policymakers, so that there's a budget readily available to increase the human resource. So therefore, this time we speak, we have 4 permanently employed consultant psychiatrists and 3 sectional psychiatrists. So a total of 7 psychiatrists, consultant level psychiatrists, are working for the prison.
Yes.
All right, and we have 1 mental health officers, and employed, permanently employed. We have 1 senior psychiatric nurse permanently employed. We have 4 psychologists. Out of 4 psychologists, 1 is sectional, and 1 out of 4 is the clinical psychologist, and other 3 are counseling psychologists. And we have also civilian psychiatric aides employed, first time to the correctional service. We have 4 right now. So basically that, and after 2010, our human resources dramatically increased, so that we have, remember now we have a 10 institution in the permanent constitution. That is the 7 adult institution and 3 juvenile services institutions. So we have to cover all these areas, So even though we have a dramatic increase now, I would say based on the standard and based on the requirement, then it's not to my level of satisfaction yet.
Especially when you have juveniles themselves having particular needs.
Because we have separate psychiatrists basically assigned specifically to the juvenile institution, so, and even mental health nurses and psychologists also. But even then now, I would say the services are not to my level of satisfaction, because I've been exposed to not only Jamaica, to other first world countries standard prison system also,
Yeah. As you say that, I would appreciate an example maybe of a better way to handle this. I know that the first thing you said was that we wouldn't want to see mentally ill persons in the prisons themselves, which is a position that JFJ supports. So what would the procedure look like based on best practice that you've seen before?
Well, the best practice basically should be, because that should be, I think, as I say, if we have impeccable services of community mental health services, if we have psychiatric bed readily available in every general hospitals, and also if we have any supported services, including not only psychiatrists, but the psychologists, social workers, occupational therapists, occupational therapy centers, and also the crisis response team, as well as the mental health response team, as well as the police officers, because you know that in Jamaica, and when we have our psychiatric patients like getting boisterous and call crisis, sometimes mental health officers have to request for the police personnel,
and
as
the
well
crisis
as
and the police
fire
not coming
brigade,
together.
as well as fire brigade. That's how our patients are behaving sometimes. So therefore now, and if you notice that also Mental Health Act, and Section 15 of the Mental Health Act also give the power to the police constable, so the police constable without any mental health team can assist that mentally ill person to apprehend and take into the psychiatric clinic or hospital for checkup, and within 30 days the officer have to write the report, and so there everything listed there too, so therefore it is a more of the comprehensive approach, responsibly of different groups that to prevent mentally ill to come into the prison or to become the offenders. That is the first step, though, so that if we can achieve that part, and we have less people come into the prison system, and we have less, things like we need to discuss today about, infrastructure challenge and other things inside we are facing, inside the correctional facilities.
Right, we are up on the break, but there are a couple of things I would want us to touch on in terms of the population size. Our report had over 300 not our report, Indicom's report had over 300, I think 313. So it would be good to know the breakdown of where the mentally ill prisoners are located, and to see whether or not the human resource that you mentioned earlier is sufficiently meeting the needs, and whether or not you can shed some light in terms of the status of review of all of those prisoners. So when we return, we'll pick up with that particular discussion.
Okay.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We are addressing mentally ill inmates in Jamaica, and we are joined by Dr. Wu, sessional consultant psychiatrist at the Department of Correctional Services. Before the break, we wanted you to firstly maybe give us an update from Indicom's report on mentally ill inmates. We saw 313 persons as inmates. So wanted to know, how does that number look now that you've had these increased resources? And we spoke about what our comprehensive plan would look like, but considering where we are, what are the first steps from this position to improve the condition of those persons who are in custody now?
Okay, and if you want to have the improvement of services, there are a number of issues that we have to address. Number one is the infrastructure issues. If you know that now our prisons were built 1800s,
yes,
we're still using that facilities, and the number are inside are crowded, so therefore, and which is not quite appropriate for any sort of rehabilitation. And even look at for the basic human rights standard, now it's not quite suitable for that. So that is the infrastructure, and challenges are quite a big issue, especially for these mentally ill people. And I don't have an exact number, but then now I can tell you that they are close to 300, and they are housed in the St. Catherine Adult Correctional Centre in Spanish Town, as well as Tower Street. But recently, the recent earthquake,
Yes.
and the government audit issue that there are some infrastructures are quite compromised. So therefore now the Department of Correction have to take decision to refurbish or to build, or even to build a new facilities or inside. So and these are yet to be informed. And so therefore we have to evacuate a number of persons from Spanish Town to Spanish Town prison to Tower Street prison. Mm-hmm. So therefore, as we speak, we have a number of the mentally ill offenders inside the Tower Street prisons are increased up to 200. Yes. So they are housed in a special location. They are in the southwest corner of the Tower Street prison called George Davis Center, as well as the hospital section. So the remaining smaller number are still in St. Catherine prison system, but they are in a special location in the hospital section and number 1 block, which is especially designated for mentally ill section. So that is the infrastructure area we need to improve dramatically, because you see, as I say, We have a number of mental health officers as well as the psychiatric consultants are also increased. So sometimes we have difficulty to find the officers to have the interview for each individual, like because we need privacy and, that kind of situation. So therefore, infrastructure needs. Second part is the human resource part now. Even though we see the number of psychiatrists increased, but it is not quite enough yet. Yeah. And then these psychiatrists alone cannot work. But the treatment of mentally ill is the teamwork.
Yes.
Not just a psychiatrist alone. We need to have a psychologist, we need to have a social worker, right? And we need to have the pharmacist supported by the pharmacist. And also we need to have a nurses trained in psychiatric nursing. We need to have psychiatric aid, and we have the activity therapists, occupational therapists for the therapeutic setting and so on. So it's a big thing we need it now. So the model we're using a biopsycho-socio-cultural model. So therefore you need medication as well as psychology, social work assistant, everything too. We especially need social worker services also in the prison too, because many of the persons are sent from a different part of the island. So they've been disconnected with their family members. Many of them are not being seen family for quite some time. So that is also one of the deterrent for their recovery of mental illnesses. So the second part is human resources part of it. Another part we need to get is the policies and the attitude change now. And inside the prison is not even though we call the places the hospital section, however, that area is not operated like the actual hospital, because in the hospital, that now you are in the ward, you are free, but inside a prison is like we are living by in the small cell. We have to share the room with 3 person, that kind of system and also the prison has the what do you call it, the fly hours and lockdown hours. So therefore in the morning they are allowed to come out from the cells to do their chore and eat and
even that seems counterproductive to one's recovery.
It is because that affects all the prison. That's a prison routine, so therefore you allow you can imagine you allow only 4 hours out and almost 20 hours locked down inside the cells. So that is counter-therapeutic, for the mentally ill especially, who are taking medication at least 2 times a day or 3 times a day, and also they need to be monitored properly, once your medication. Sometimes some of them have to get the injection, so therefore now we need to monitor another 24-hour nursing care, we don't have the nurses yet, to cover 8-hour shift like that. So those are the things so to have that now, policy change, and to open up the so-called this hospital section needs to be operated like real hospital section, there need to be a special kind of that. For that is we need a perception change, attitude change, and also policy change.
Two critical questions from me. You intimated at it earlier, the forensic psychiatric facility that was promised in that report by the Minister of Health in the Indicom report, not the Indicom report, following the Noel Chambers, that report that was developed, can't remember the name of it now, that was promised. Are you able to shed any light? Do you have any insight on that?
That was a recommendation, I think, came out of that. And also I could recall, because I served in the committee, Mental Health Inquiry Committee.
Yes,
and
that
one I think
report,
you're talking about. Right. And that's a recommendation. I have made the recommendation, different area and the primary care system before they committed, and then also what the police should do when the mentally ill were in their custody and also inside the prison system. But then until now, I think there are a number of the meetings and the discussions were held by both sides of the aisles, I would say, both political parties when they're in power, to have this forensic psychiatric hospital. But so far, we haven't seen any of the solid plan yet, So that is the situation at this point.
Thank you so much. Another recommendation which seemingly has started, just to indicate to our listeners, we invited the Legal Aid Council to the interview because they have started to assist in the process of having the mentally ill prisoners released, but it is to go through a particular process. So, for example, those who perhaps have recovered or have the capacity to be released to their family members, then that would be done with the assistance of NGOs as well, but certainly from the legal aid. And then the other side of it was that there should be an assessment, certainly one from the psychiatrist, to see if they're able to have trials.
Right. Fitness to plea.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you have any update on that?
Yes. I would say generally we can say two groups. One is the psychotic, all are psychosis, but however, I can generally say two groups. One is that those people with chronic psychosis who will never recover at all, even with the best treatment. Yeah, they are totally burnt out cases, chronic cases.
Yes.
And the second group is that there are people who have in the therapeutic environment, their recovery will be quick. And so therefore their likelihood that they would be fit to plea again. All right. So either category, and they need legal representation.
Yes.
So in that case, legal aid counsel, and in the past, like Independent Jamaican Council for Human Rights, people coming in and to represent them. So by law, this Criminal Justice Administration Act, Section 25, you need two psychiatrists need to certify if the person is found unfit to plea. All right. So in that case, now both psychiatrists need to provide a comprehensive psychiatric report. Yeah. To present to the court, and either High Court or the Parish Court, and then now the two psychiatrists has to go to attend the court and testify the findings, and then the judge will make an order, special order, which is the same in the Criminal Justice Administration Act. So in that case, we have to do. So we are quite busy at this point, we can say that, and the number of requests to received now are increasing every day, and our psychiatrists are quite busy attending courts all the island now, and but here again, what I see also that sometimes there is what I like to see though is a cross training between the psychiatry and the legal system, because in the past I could recall when my late friend Nancy Anderson was alive,
Yes.
And we used to travel around the island and train, and the clerk of the court and and private law chambers and stuff like that how to request their comprehensive psychiatric report and so on. But now what happened is that I think we have a new generation coming. Sometime when we receive the request letter from the court, now they are not provided with any requirement papers and deposition and statements. Because if you look at it now, that when mentally ill person come to the prison, he alone came into the prison. The person presenting with gross psychotic features, and you can't get proper history at all. Sometimes there's no informant contact at all. So right now we have to request, all these things now. So then there's a delay process. Now we have to communicate with the particular court or clerk of the court or whoever requested from the DPP office, to get those contact numbers. So we have to find out, because sometimes the request by the court is quite specific there. It's not just fit to plea. You have to give the opinion of the diminished responsibility. Whether the person is mentally ill before the incident or at the time he committed the offense. So in that case, now we need to get more informant history. So in that case, now we need to contact the family members who lived with before he got arrested and ask history. So it's not that straightforward at all. It's quite busy. If you can imagine, there is no contact information. We are quite not blind.
Yes.
So then we are quite busy calling different family members, our request and so on. So the report is quite some time takes to. So right now our report, comprehensive report, if you requested, the court requested now, it's take about 6 to 8 weeks to complete that, because sometimes we need to do serial interviews. Because the person cannot be quite consistent, one history, one interview, and the person gave you one type of history, another interview is another history. So therefore everything needs to be recorded, because we need to have a very fair trial for this person, so that kind of system so we have to do. So it's quite busy at this point, for all the psychiatrists inside the Putava Street.
It's just interesting that because we have cases here at JFJ that we've supported where there's a recommendation that this individual can go home to families. The families are quite open to receiving the individual, but some hiccup happens in the system and years pass before anything happens. So, just generally, what last recommendation you would
the challenge for those individuals to go home is basically, I don't think, in my experience, rests in the Department of Corrections, because we provide timely report, 6 to 8 weeks, and we attended courts regularly. But the issue is that the court and the legal aid council have difficulty to find appropriate places for them. Sometimes the family they don't have a capacity to accommodate them. Sometimes there is not much nursing homes to accommodate them. And as you know, that Bellevue, by the policy, will not keep or admit them at all, right? So therefore, in that case now, even after the judge ruled that under court's pleasure, the judge have no choice to send them back to prison. So that is very unfortunate part of it. So I like to see in the future that more facilities outside, it's not the hospital, but the halfway houses or supervised living places for the forensic piece. Because you see, I've been exposed to South Florida system. So what happens is that if you have a forensic psychiatric hospital, you have different grade: maximum security, medium care security, and low care security. So you grade it down from low care facility hospital to the community group homes before they are actually sent back to their loved one. So that kind of system, like they should have it here. So I think the best way to go forward in the future is that the government should operate this kind of the assisted care living facilities and supervised living facility, along with private-public partnership. I think that should be the best way to go forward.
All right, great. Thank you so much. We appreciate your joining us, and I can tell you, you've given us much recommendations here at JFJ, and with our partnership with Stand Up and the attorneys, we will continue to provide the legal support and the public advocacy.
Right, you're welcome.
I appreciate you.
Right.
All right, we take the break and then we close out the show. Yesterday was the local government election, and interestingly enough, we still don't have the final count. The Electoral Office of Jamaica say up to Thursday. But there's a few observations yesterday from a rights-based approach that, I would want us to touch on. But I hear that we have a caller. Is it Omario?
We have a caller? Omario?
Hello.
Hey, Omario.
No, it's not Omario. It's Omalo.
Omalo, how are you?
I'm okay, Michaela. How are you doing?
I am well, thanks. Yes, Omalo, he was a frequent caller on another radio program, Omario. It's good to hear from you.
Yeah, because I'm saying, let me get right into it, because the program's soon finished. You need an next hour. Anyway. Yeah.
I agree.
So really, definitely need an next hour to interchange with people if you're talking about human rights and stuff like that. Yeah, but I'm saying, do you consider economic freedom a human right?
It should be. It's one of the more recent generation of rights, but it's not spelled out in our constitution, but it should be.
I think it is something that should be advocated for, because people with better socio-economic conditions demand all the rights that you are fighting for.
Agreed. Deal with so many social inequalities.
Yeah, and you would have a stronger team to fight. But whenever you have a weak team, people that really are trying to survive, they're not worrying about really rights. They're worrying about their survival.
Yes, agreed.
So I think one of the things should be pushed is the socio-economic condition of Jamaica as a right. One's supposed to have a right to take care of their family. And if you don't have that right, you're in survival mode. It makes no sense for me to worry about every other thing when I'm supposed to be worrying about surviving.
And then when people bread and butter needs aren't being met, that is how you find that so many things are compromised.
Are very much so. So I think one of the things that we are really not doing is asking the question why things are so or why things are so. And really, because, we have been fighting for statutory rights, we are fighting for human rights, and we have been getting them piecemeal. But really, our condition in taking care of ourselves is not really been changing. And that is what needs to change for us to stand up for the real rights that we're supposed to get.
Yes. You know, one of the recommendations that we made to the Constitutional Reform Committee is that we should look at some of what Guyana, our neighbor, has, notwithstanding their economic conditions, focusing on the legislative and the constitutional framework now. They have aspects of social and economic right that deal with some labor law issues in their constitution, labor rights, rights to work, and so on. So I completely agree with you.
Economic freedom, political freedom without economic freedom is no freedom at all.
Yes.
So if our constitution doesn't address what really is our day-to-day life, which is our economic freedom, really and truly we don't have a constitution. We just have a document, put in place for how the government to run. And that is why the people are taken aback from this old political system, because the system, no matter who you put there, it's going to fail us because it's the system they're working by.
You know, yesterday there was a video on social media, a lady, and I told people not to chastise her at all. She said that she's voting for one particular political party because they gave her 3 bags of chicken, I believe she said. And she said if the other one came before the local government election, the vote is casted and give her 4 bags, she would certainly vote for that particular political party. And it's an indication of that people voting based on this transactional approach.
Based on their survival. And survival, it's basically, I'm doing this based on my survival.
Yes.
The most important thing man is here on earth to do is to survive.
Yeah.
Everything comes after.
Yeah.
So if my survival is based on getting food to eat, give me the chicken and I will vote. You understand me? So what we need is to address the economic freedom in our constitution. And our constitution address nothing about our economy, rather than to pay back the bondholders in Jamaica that are getting...
It give a right to education at pre and primary levels, Omalo. That's what it gives you.
So we really and truly, there is a reason why we are just being turned off from the system, because it doesn't really matter who is there. We know whose interest they serve.
Yeah.
They serve the donor class.
We have to leave it there, Marlo. But please call back next week, and I love to have a chat with you off air.
Okay, I'll definitely do. Could you tell her to the operator to take my number?
Yes, we'll ask. Thank you so much. You take care.
Okay. All right.
Jade, you know our position on social and economic.
I do.
Well, you wrote some of it. So.
But it's good to hear that we're not the only ones seeing the gap.
People have been calling for it. It's just that governments tend not to put these things in the constitution, because if me put it in there, you go claim my rights for me, and then you have to go to parliament and actually do some work. And then make promises with minimum wage going to a level that really still is not at a livable wage component. But just to quickly say, yesterday when I went to my polling division in Portmore to vote, we now have a Disabilities Act, and there are provisions that the EOJ, the Electoral Office of Jamaica, would have put in place. Now, having stood in line, we observed several people. Some are elderly, some are older folks, some with disabilities. Absolutely no provision by the Electoral Office to cater to the needs. Now, naturally, some of us started making recommendations, move things around. The response of one of the officers, we should negotiate among ourselves who we want to move ahead in the line. We said no. At the very least, some chairs should be placed in an area where these individuals are not in the sun standing up for a long time. Anyway, we continue to advocate. One of the seemingly senior officers came out. A young man spoke to him. He started shouting, "If you're too sick for turn up, turn in your yard." I was in complete shock. Of course, I made a report officially to EOJ. But I've never seen this. And you're telling me that we should negotiate who moves ahead in the line, when you should have a reasonable system in place to ensure that the more vulnerable among us still exercise their right to vote. Very concerning, and I hope when the next election comes, constitutionally due next year, September, this doesn't happen. But another area of concern, Jade, I'm not sure if you saw CAFE, Citizen Action for Free and Fair Election, who has been around since 97, who has achieved observer status.
Yes.
And for those who don't know, an independent observation of our electoral system is critical to democracy.
Yes.
We used to have agencies like Carter Center from overseas coming to look at making sure that we are cast the vote right, stuff no ballot and so on. And Jamaica has moved to a stage where you can have a local entity doing that. You know how big of a deal that is for democracy?
Absolutely.
And CAFE, Grace Baston, the new chair, indicated yesterday that close to 40 of those independent observers were asked at some point to leave the polling divisions, and at some point they were not able to also observe the final vote count. I trust that the Electoral Office of Jamaica will fix it. Jamaica has come a far way in the maturity and strength of our democracy, and something like independent observation of our electoral processes on the day of an election is too critical to come in any disrepute. So looking forward to that particular fix.
Indeed. Well, Mikkel, we are at the end of the show.
Yes, and just to say, 2 staff members sent their purple finger.
Oh boy.
And I knew one voted before because they were an election worker.
I shall remain comment free.
So that's 4 of us.
Hit me up next year, September.
Oh, so you declare my own. So draw your own. You see? Involuntary disclosure of your own thing.
And that's all the time we have.
No, you don't. You don't say who's the winner yet. Yes, you're rushing off here.
Okay. So Asasaji has won again.
Okay.
This week, the answer for the question was 2011. That was the last time that our Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms was amended. So, Asasaji will reach out to you via DM.
Yes.
Thank you all so much for joining us. I am Jade Williams.
And I'm Mikkel Jackson. See you next week.